Hello, and welcome to Food Co-op Initiative's monthly webinar series. Today, you are with us for Co-op as the Hero, Storytelling for Startups. So thank you at home for joining us, and especially want to thank Patricia and Leslie for being here.
Hi, everybody. Hi, thank you. From Minneapolis.
All right, yeah, and I'm here in Virginia. We are spread all about, and hopefully we have, I would guess, probably between 20 and 30 states covered on the line today. We have over 100 people registered for today's webinar. This is one of our most popular topics to date. So thank you so much for being with us and for offering this great topic. I am Susie Carter, Director of Programs and Partnerships for Food Co-op Initiative, and we're proud to present this series of informational webinars for startup organizers and their supporters. Food Co-op Initiative, for those of you who aren't as familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that's committed to providing support and resources to people organizing food co-op grocery stores across the country. We've helped open 70 new grocery stores and are working with 120 communities across the country right now. How exciting is that? We're here to help you to get started down the right path and provide you with the resources and help you need along the way. If you're just getting started, please pick up the phone, give us a call, write us an email. You can find out more at foodcoopinitiative.coop. Some of the most important steps we take are in those earliest of days and months. And also special thanks to our grant supporters from the USDA, National Co-op Bank, National Cooperative Grocers Association, and by donations from our friends at established co-ops and their members. Thanks to all of you. We really couldn't do it without you. All right, so a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Today's webinar is currently being recorded on YouTube and will post live at the end of this session. You can also find it through our website at foodcoopinitiative.coop, where you'll also find an extensive library of other webinars and resources ranging from what to do first to hiring a general manager when you're ready to open. So please be sure to sign up for our next webinar. That one is going to be Designing Your Co-op with Nicole Klimek, also of CDS Consulting Co-op, on September 16th. That's a really fun one to start thinking about where the grocery aisles are going to go and what your store is actually going to look like. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can post them on the YouTube page right in the comment box below us. And just make sure that you're logged in. Give it a try now. You can say hello, introduce yourself, what co-op you're from. We'd love to know who's here. And we'll try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar, so please stay with us. Our guests today are Patricia Cumbie and Leslie Watson of CDS Consulting Co-op. I'm humbled by their joint experience. Patricia Cumbie has been in the co-op sector for 25 years. She has written for a number of handbooks, history books, and co-ops. She is a published novelist as well. She loves sharing the values of cooperation with people, and over the course of her career, both at Seward, Mississippi Market, Lakewinds Food Co-op, some of the best in our industry today, Patricia worked as a marketing and member services director, customer service manager, trainer, editor of The Mix, and co-author of some of the manuals that you are probably using to help start your store, including How to Start a Food Co-op Manual and the Membership Equity Toolbox. Next, Leslie Watson, she has been where you have been right now. She has long been motivated by the power of cooperation, and this led her to become involved in the Eastside Food Co-op in Minneapolis. She started in 2002 during its startup phase. Leslie served on the board for nearly 10 years and was recognized for her contribution for board service with the Howard Bowers Award. Leslie currently works for CDS Consulting Co-op and the Cooperative Development Services based out of the Twin Cities. And she won first place in a local casserole cook-off. So you know you're in good company. All right, so without further ado, let me introduce Patricia and Leslie.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here. Yeah. So I would like to start by saying I'm very thrilled and honored to be here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is telling the co-op story. And before we jump into everything that we're going to talk about today, I want to let you know that our plan for today is to share with you a very powerful tool that we've developed that we think will help you be able to tell the co-op story, whether It is one-on-one. Let's say you're at the farmer's market, or you need to talk to the media, you need to create a sequence of Twitter feeds, whatever it is. What we have created, we think, is something that you will find very useful. In fact, it's something that I use in my work every day, and it's very simple and powerful tool. So without further ado, I would like to start by saying that how do we tell this co-op story, and how do we make it resonant for people and relevant and something that they feel like they can relate to? So the first thing I would say is that we really need to think about what is our purpose in terms of our co-op storytelling. We're not just, saying a lot of blah, blah, whatever about the co-op, but we want to think about it more intentionally. So when we think about our purpose as co-op storytellers, I would say that our number one job, if you will, is to build relationships with other people. All of the successful established co-ops that you may be familiar with today definitely spent a lot of time building relationships with people over the years, and they still continue to do that. So that is really the important work that we have ahead of us. The other thing that we need to consider when we are thinking about our storytelling purpose is how do we include others in this storytelling process, and how do we include others in the process of building our co-op. So this is another aspect of storytelling that is very purposeful. As we tell our co-op story, one of the things that we do is we grow and become more vital and bring more people into the co-op movement. And then lastly, when we share the co-op story, we're also sharing the benefits of cooperation. Not only those benefits that we feel like we would experience personally having a food co-op in our community, but having a co-op in the community for so many other reasons, including, jobs and increased sustainability and vitality in our local economy. So all of these things play into why are we telling the story. So we need to think about our purpose. So, yeah.
Well, so I just wanted to say, I think it's, a point really well taken for any co-op, but especially for startups, because as Pat kind of alluded to, you're actually constantly changing and evolving and connecting with new people and bringing new people in all the time. And as you move through the stages of development, what you emphasize, how you talk about the co-op will really change. And I certainly have seen that with Eastside through the many years of involvement there. So I think having that purpose in mind and being tuned into it and practicing being attentive to it is going to, be really important to effective storytelling at any time.
Right. Okay, so now we have this premise of our purpose in terms of our storytelling. So how do we actually go about telling a good story? Now, I have come up with what I think are the 5 perhaps most important and also perhaps the most basic elements of telling a good story. I have 5 here that I've listed for you, and certainly there are many more, but I think these are the ones that will really resonate most with people that we're talking to out in the community. Okay, so what are the elements of a good story? The first thing is action. When we think about literature, action is the plot. It's the journey that our main character is going to go through. For food co-ops, action is really a big word, I think, because co-ops do so much action on behalf of their owners and consumers and the community that I think if we hang some of our co-op storytelling around action, it's a very powerful thing. Now, the second one on the list may surprise you, which is conflict. And I didn't put that on there so we would go out and, foment conflict out in our communities. The reason I put that in there is in literature, you do not have a story if you do not have conflict. If I wrote a story about two people sitting around having tea, looking out at the sunset, that probably wouldn't be a very exciting story to you. But how does this relate to co-ops? Well, what I think about when I think about conflict in stories, it's really about change. What is the character, if you will, undergoing in terms of change, or what do they want to change? And I think it's a really important thing to think about in terms of co-ops. And it's a little different from action. You might think they're kind of similar, but action is what we do on behalf of others. And I think the change or the conflict is partly what's our reason? What is it that we want to see is different? And I think that there's a lot that co-ops can talk about regarding that.
Is it kind of, Pat, like the change we want to see in the world is kind of the nut of our conflict sometimes?
Right, yes. So, of course, it also goes without saying that you can't have a great story without a strong character. And in terms of co-ops, we have an incredible opportunity to really talk about character in so many different ways. For example, we have amazing people in our movement that we can feature and talk about and tell people, wow, this person really inspired me. This person is one of my co-op heroes. We also have people in our local community, people who have worked incredibly hard, like, members of the board of startup food co-ops, for example, who are heroes to me because I know some of the sacrifices. And I think that, letting people know who you are and why you're involved is a really powerful story. And then lastly, related to character, the co-op model really offers us a lot in that regard as well, because when we think about, well, what is the character of co-ops, we have a whole list of 10 values. We have things like honesty, transparency, self-help, democracy, equity. These are the things that define the character of cooperation. So it's people and it's the idea.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the co-op itself is sometimes the character?
Oh,
the hero?
for sure.
The big character, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I've often thought that there should be a TV show that takes place in a food co-op.
Right. Reality show or other? I don't know.
Either. Okay, so the next one I have on the list is context. And in literature, often this means, what is the historical context or the economic context, the social context that deepens and enriches the story. And this is true for food co-ops as well. And we definitely have a context in these times for why we are doing startups and why we are cooperating. And I think context is one of those things that really gets at the heart of the co-op principle of education, because that's such a big part of storytelling for food co-ops, is not only the food we carry, but the idea of cooperation, etc. So providing context is really, really huge. That whole question, why would I pay more for an organic apple? That is a context-oriented issue. Mm-hmm. And then last, but definitely not least, is emotion. You definitely need some kind of personal connection. What is it that motivates you to be involved in this movement? What is it that you want to see different that is related to what you want in your own life? So.
And how about the emotional connection or attachment that you actually have to the co-op itself? Mm-hmm. I mean, that can be sometimes the most effective form of co-op storytelling when we have those strong sense of belonging or, love or whatever it is,
right.
It can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm. And it's something personal. I've heard from people, well, I have a son with food allergies and I need access to food. That's a very personal reason for wanting to have a food co-op in your community. And someone could relate to that. Definitely. Okay.
Great. So next, we're gonna we actually want to introduce you to the technique that Pat mentioned early on, and it's really using a keyword strategy to construct an elevator speech that incorporates some of these narrative elements that Pat has just identified. So while we are using the keyword strategy in an elevator speech way today, actually it can be effective in lots of different kinds of storytelling that you do. So Pat,
yeah.
Tell us how to do it.
All right. So the first thing that I want you to do is to think of a word, one word, that you feel personally and positively describes your co-op or your co-op group. And what I want you to do is type that word, and you can type that word and send it in here to FCI, and in a little while Susie will probably share with us what some of those words are, which I'm really excited about because I just love how storytelling begets storytelling. Okay, so the first thing is think of your word. All right, so you have your one word. Now the next part of this is I want you to think of 3 things related to that word that have meaning for you. As you think about this, though, again, we're coming back to our purpose in terms of the storytelling. We're coming back to using our tools of narrative. So in those 3 bullet points that you would think of, I definitely want you to include an emotional component or something personal about why the co-op means something to you. And then I'd like you to take a look at that list in terms of, you know, all the other things, action, change, conflict, context, and pick one of those and work with that particular word. So as you're thinking about that, and again, this is a, you know, a very quick webinar, so you'll have plenty of time to think about this afterward, but to get you going, I've asked Leslie to come up with a word and share with us her 3 things that she chose regarding her particular word.
Okay, so of course I'm talking about my home co-op of the Eastside Food Co-op in Northeast Minneapolis, and the word that I chose is real, and it's kind of in honor of startups in a way because you're still a dream and not real yet, and I wanted to I think that word is powerful to me because that co-op was a dream for us and now it's real. And so I think when I think of the Eastside Food Co-op, I know that it is the real deal. It has 5 sweet aisles of great groceries where you just know you're going to run into a friend and neighbor almost every time you shop. It is down to earth and cheerful and friendly and bedecked with local art, and really it's part of the heart and soul of Northeast Minneapolis. It is not the coolest spot in town, and it knows that it does not have to be because it is a real place for real people, and it's a little bit like home.
Oh, that's fantastic.
There you go.
I love how you call that home. You have a real love affair with your co-op.
I do. Well, I spent a lot of time in the boardroom too, but I don't feel quite as much love for the boardroom as I do for the co-op itself. But
well, that really came through in what you said in terms of your language, as well as, you know, the enthusiasm that you have when you share that story with others. So what we would like to do now, Susie, do you have some words for us?
Yeah, we are. I'm refreshing the page, so apologies if yours is coming through and I'm not seeing it yet. But go right ahead, type one of your words. It doesn't have to be the perfect word, but what's a word that comes to mind that really inspires you, that makes you think about your startup? We'd love to hear it in the comments and share some of that with Patricia and Leslie now.
Well, I can tell you that I've done this exercise a number of times with different groups, and one of the words that always, 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 always comes up is community. And I think that there's probably a lot of people out there who could probably relate to that particular word. And actually, it's one of my own words when I think of my co-op and the community that I live in.
And you could go on for many more than 3 bullet points about what that means to you, I think. So rich.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
we have 2 words here.
Okay.
Yeah. One word, I love this, catalyst.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Great.
what does that make you think about when you hear that?
Well, for me, I think that it's so incredibly apropos for startups, you know. And when I think of startups in terms of the food co-op sector, I think the fact that we're having this conversation is such a catalyst for all kinds of co-op storytelling. I feel like the people working on startups have really, in their own ways, created a lot of synergies in our movement that is just extremely exciting. So I'm so glad to hear that word, catalyst.
Yeah. Another word that we have here is birthright.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Real.
I just would love to hear the story behind
of that one.
Yeah,
yeah,
So,
yeah. That
great.
sounds very deep and grounded.
Yeah, and really I feel like it's at the heart of some of the passion. You know, sometimes people that have been members of food co-ops for 30, 40 years, they've lost that real deep connection that this is our right, this is what we need, it's our lifeblood. It runs so deep for people that start food co-ops. That passion is so contagious.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Well, we have some examples that we would like to share with people here on the webinar of examples of people telling their co-op story. So the first one that we have here is from Wasatch Cooperative Market in Salt Lake City, Utah, and on their website they have a page where new members have left comments about, you know, why they decided to become involved in the co-op, and they have pictures. And I'd just like to share one with you. A member there named Elaine. I can't wait to shop at our very own co-op. In the meantime, I'm proud to join the community of other member owners who are working to bring quality, locally grown food to our tables. And I just love how community is included in this, that the co-op itself asked for people to, you know, tell them what their co-op story is, why they wanted to be involved. So this particular thing really encourages participation. The next one I have is from social media, Facebook, Sugar Beet Co-op in Oak Park, Illinois, and the woman on the left with the red background, the co-op asked her, why do you support the Sugar Beet Co-op? We want to support local farmers and producers, eat good food, and buy from a store that cares about its community and doesn't have profits at the tippity top of its value system. I love this one because I feel like she really puts co-ops into context. You know, this is how co-ops are different. We're motivated by different values. And then the next one I have here is a mini profile that Worth Co-op in Minneapolis did of a woman who recently joined the co-op, and I'll read this one as well. Sooth Soleil became a member of the Worth Cooperative grocery store. Sooth wants to see affordable, culturally diverse foods in her neighborhood and has committed to door-knocking her Lao neighbors to become dues-paying members as well. Sign up to become a member now, and there's a link. And I gotta tell you, I love this one too, because this one is very personal. She says she wants culturally specific foods, and she's going to take action on that, and she's going to go around and tell her neighbors. And not only that, others have been invited into this conversation to become a member. So it really covers a lot. Very good example of purpose and narrative in these examples. And Leslie has some too.
Yeah, I had a couple examples too. I thought it would be interesting to apply this lens to a Twitter feed. And so one that I follow and have really been appreciating lately is the Hub City Co-op out of Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is a startup. And they are regular tweeters, and there's a couple. I just pulled a few representative samples. So the very first one up at the top is about the snappiest, most concise synopsis of the co-op model. Like the Rochdale Pioneers couldn't have done it better. So really nice, and 140 characters and less. And then the next one down below on the left is just a shot of somebody's bumper sticker in town, and I think it's really great to think about creating a sense of place in your storytelling, especially for a startup when you don't have a place yet. So I think that's a really nice little way to do that. Throughout their Twitter feed, you will find many kinds of references to other organizations and other events and other things going on, and they're just really great about weaving all of that in, so it gives a sense of lively, dynamic kind of environment that the co-op is part of. And then the other thing about it is the language that they use is really snappy and great, so that's a really nice aspect. Of course, it's well written. The final thing is the one on the bottom there is a picture of, let's see, I have it here. It says, Carolina's Heritage in a Bowl, celebrating scuppernongs, muscadines, #local, and a store that'll put them in easy reach. So, context, emotion. I love that. I was thinking about hashtag as kind of the keyword around which you can build a tweet and a story, And so, you like build on that story. And because they are sprinkled throughout their Twitter feed is reference to their upcoming capital campaign. So I think tactically also it's a great place to think about telling a lot of different dynamic kinds of stories that are hitting lots of different audiences while you're seeding your owners to kind of get ready for a capital campaign. So I thought that's a pretty nice example. Mm-hmm. The next one I chose, I wanted to just touch on this because I work with startups sometimes with their capital campaigns, and the capital campaign storytelling can be pretty challenging, I think, for a couple reasons. The first is, I think there's some hesitance about telling the story because we know we can't solicit non-owners to invest in our co-op, and that is immediately kind of sets a obstacle to how we can tell our story and to whom. So that's a piece of it. But the other thing is that it's just really technical. There's a lot of information and a lot of detail in a capital campaign. And so, finding ways to embed maybe some of these narrative elements and being thoughtful about it might make it seem nicer. So on the left is just this wonderful little Valentine at River Valley Market, no longer a startup, but they were a few years ago. They put this out as part of an upcoming member loan campaign, and I just thought it was this really wonderful kind of nostalgic element, but also an expression of kind of love for our owners, that was a really, really nice element. And then on the right is the East Aurora Co-op in New York, which has done a pretty interesting thing. They've made this infographic that basically tells the story of a capital campaign, in a really simple way, breaks it down, has a little humor, has some nice color, and tells that story, that complex story, in a way that's pretty accessible. So just a couple of examples to think about different ways of doing it.
And I really like the use in so many of these examples of using pictures of people. And I know that startups often feel at a disadvantage because they don't actually have a store. But I have to tell you that I do a lot of co-op writing, and I'll ask for a photo and I'll get a picture of the store, which is, it's nice, but it doesn't say a lot, not as much as people do. So I wouldn't think of where you're at as a disadvantage in terms of telling the story, because I think there's a lot of potential with that. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to leave you with a few words of conclusion before we take questions. We definitely want you to use this keyword technique, and again, it's useful for one-on-one conversations with people, hanging out, tabling. It's also useful if you're going to be talking to a reporter and you want to get yourself prepared for that conversation. You can do it in meetings. You can do it with a group. You can have a group word, So there's a lot of ways that you can use this application. And then as some final words to leave you with regarding telling the co-op story, I think it's just important that we continue to listen to others along the way in the process, that we continue to practice it, because it's not something that you do it once and it's over with. As you probably all know, you just continue to tell the story. The story starts to change, and that's a really interesting dynamic as well. And then lastly, for every opportunity that you do have in person with people, turn it into a storytelling experience. Be sure to ask people, why are you here? What are you hopeful for? And in that way, you continue to perpetuate that co-op story and bring other people into it, thereby fulfilling the purpose of the co-op storytelling that we talked about at the beginning.
I'm a one-person. Applause.
Sure, yeah. Oh, that's right. The end.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I feel transformed. That was my word, and I feel transformed just listening to you. The keyword trick, that's just so helpful. There's just so many things to think about, and we're put on the spot all the time to tell our story. So I love it. So practical, and it's so helpful, and just grounds you when you're trying to come up with something on the spot. That's great.
Yeah, and you actually bring up a good point. If you feel like you need to prepare for other people's words, you can also use it for that, and get yourself ready. You just never know,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, while we have Patricia and Leslie on the line here, we're going to open this up to some Q&A. So please, burning questions, even just maybe you're struggling right now with a particular point in your co-op's development, and you're struggling to figure out how the story is going to change. Please ask us now in the comment box. Go ahead, and we will grill our seasoned storytellers and pick their insightful brains. Some great advice. So go ahead. It might take a minute to load, and I'm refreshing as fast as I can. So please leave your questions below. All right. We had one come through earlier. So let's see. A big popular question with our startups is, what do you do when people are telling conflicting stories about the co-op?
That's a great question. I think first off, we have to remember that we're all human beings. And, we're probably not all gonna, fall into step, at least immediately, around a certain thing. Maybe there's a lot of confusion and what have you. And to me, this is really an issue of communicating, continually communicating that vision. So if, for example, the co-op is consistently sending out tweets or Facebook, even newsletter periodically, I think as long as you are consistently working it, even if nothing's happening, and I think sometimes people feel like, oh, there's nothing happening, there's no news. Well, you still need to continue to communicate, because otherwise people start to fill in the blanks with their own ideas about that.
I think, too, that it's really natural, as Pat said at the beginning. Part of the work of building your co-op is building shared vision and alignment, and that is going to get tighter and better and more coherent and more cohesive as you move along. And if you're really early on, you actually don't know yet exactly what it's going to be. So the fact that there are a diversity of stories is very natural. And that having been said, I think ideally the co-op is a big enough umbrella for people to have different stories and for it to serve different needs. Yeah. And so is it a conflicting story, or is it a compatible story? And that's probably worth a thought or two as well.
Great answers. Thank you. And it allows me to also breathe a little bit, and hopefully other organizers too, right? Is that we can't figure it all out in the beginning, and it's a process.
Yeah.
Another question, definitely putting you on the spot. They said, Delia here from a startup in Rhode Island we're super excited about. Can you give your elevator speech or pitch?
You? Oh, yeah. Well,
for CDS, Consulting Co-op.
Well, I'm going to talk about my co-op, which is Seward Co-op. I live in the Seward Co-op neighborhood. And I have to say that community is definitely my word. And the reason why it's so important to me is that, you know, I didn't grow up in the cradle of cooperation or anything like that. And, you know, people in my world struggled a lot. You know, people didn't feel like they had a lot of control economically. So when I learned about what a co-op was, when I learned the story of the Rochdale pioneers, I was so blown away. Partly because they were just average people like me and my mom and dad, you know. And so I am just so thrilled to be a part of a movement that you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be special in any way. As long as you want to be a part of it, then you're welcome to be a part of it. And I walk my neighborhood every day, and I go by my co-op every day, and I just feel like it's given me so much, and that's why I'm so motivated to do the work that I do, because I want other people to feel the same sense of stability and good health and well-being that goes along with having a food co-op in the neighborhood. So that's my own biggest thing.
It's beautiful.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Leslie, did you want to give yours, or do you feel like you explained yours pretty good already?
Mine is the real deal.
Yeah.
Good. And do you have any other examples of other co-ops who you think are doing a great job of communicating that some of our startups could look into on their time?
Boy, Susie, that is a question for you, who scanned startups.
I can some of those answers in on the box, but if you have any off the top of your head, feel free to share.
The Bisman Food Co-op is one that I've watched a little bit and think like they're doing some really nice work. I just saw a really lovely kind of another pictorial sort of journey down the road on the horizon on their website, you know, and there's a real sense of authenticity that comes through. You know, I mean, I love them all, and I think that they are all have great stories to tell. So I don't know, that one pops into my mind, as well as the others that we mentioned earlier.
Well, I know this one's established and open, but the Fairbanks co-op in Alaska, I think they just have done an amazing thing, because, you know, there's a place where people were really not that familiar with the co-op model, so they were starting from scratch. And they were also starting from scratch in terms of awareness of locally grown, and, you know, it's such a big deal that they're creating a market that didn't exist at all, that is really going to be great 5-10 years down the line.
Yeah, I agree about Fairbanks. That I watch them. I follow their Facebook feed, or they're my Facebook feed. And their story about local is one that I have just been so impressed with. So they do a really nice job of communicating that in pictures and words and all.
Speaking of that, so speaking of pictures, it comes through from a question as well. How do you feel like you can incorporate your tips and your framework towards photos and visual storytelling?
Well, I think that could probably be another webinar. But you know, my sense is that as many times as you can document with pictures the activities of your co-op, and not even just the ones that take place out in the public realm, but people getting together in meetings, you know, even those like incredibly early, we're hanging out in the dining room at so-and-so's house. And the reason I say that is, you know, when I wrote the 40-year history of Seward Co-op, those pictures were so incredibly valuable, you know, 40 years hence. And you often think that what's happening in the here and now isn't that important. And people are always throwing stuff out because they, you know, but maybe it's because I was a history major in college, but I just save everything.
Yeah, I can totally affirm that, Pat. We, you know, with Eastside, our startup was about an 8-year startup, and we opened in 2003. And so really our early startup was kind of pre-wide prevalence of digital cameras. And I am just mad that we did not do a better job archiving. We do have some, and it's really great to have it. But you know, having that, being attentive to that storytelling and understanding that it may not be about a constructed narrative, but you're actually building a story over time, and capturing that and documenting it, you know, now. It will serve your future co-op really well.
Yeah,
So.
and other co-ops I've noticed have also used the timeline, you know, to tell that narrative along with pictures. So just take pictures.
I think the timeline is good because it helps to impart momentum of movement, which you always want to, you know, be doing in your site. So,
and people, please get people, and try to remember to keep their names. That's another thing. You know, 5 years away, you'll be like, who was this person? You know. So.
Yeah, that's a great call, and I think it touches on a lot of stuff that we talk about around membership development as well. It's easy in the beginning that you're only a few people and you're meeting in somebody's house. There's almost a sense of embarrassment of like, oh well, people knew how small we were, how, you know, unprofessional we were. They would never want to join this and invest. But what I hear you saying is that's actually some of the draw, because that's the story, is that there's people in your community that want to be a part when you're only 5 people and you're in a dining room. And they want to come on board and say, I want to help those people. I want to do that.
Yeah. Just Photoshop out the cans of Coke.
Great. If we have any more questions here, we have, all right. How do you, okay, this is a common question that we get too, is how do you tell a story that is bigger than the store, but also still focuses on the goal of opening a store, right? It's so easy to get so involved with all the impact that we're going to have years later, and it kind of diverts us from the energy of opening the store. So how do you combine those two when you're doing storytelling?
You want me to go? Well, you know, when I think about the movement as a whole, and when I think about what we're doing now today, I continually go back to the Rochdale pioneers. You know, they were the people who founded the co-op movement as we know it. I mean, people have been cooperating for millennia. But I think to take people who 150 years ago were doing the same exact thing for the same exact reasons, and to notice that they built an incredibly powerful worldwide movement. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. We're just part of that same story, that continuation of that story. So, you know, for me, I'm always going back to the founders in terms of, you know, why are we here? What's our purpose? How does it connect to the here and now? You know, what's interesting? The Rochdale pioneers, after they founded their food co-op, the idea spread so rapidly throughout Europe that there were 1,000 food co-ops within, like, how many years? I think it was 10 years? 10 years. Okay, 1,000 food co-ops in 10 years in England, around Europe, no Facebook, no Twitter, you know, it was all snail mail, it was all meetings, getting together in pubs, which, you know. So, it's, the continuity is there.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to do?
Yeah, well, and so, yeah, I think, and when you're thinking about telling the story of your own particular co-op and putting it in, that's part of your context that you might use, but you want to be just, you know, intentional about purpose, because you're going to tell lots of different stories to lots of different people for lots of different reasons. And as long as you are really mindful and thoughtful about purpose and who is my audience today and what is my reason for telling the story today, you will be able to, you know, create a narrative around your own co-op that brings in but does not distract to kind of that bigger picture story.
I love that.
So,
yeah.
Well said. I think that is the perfect close.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Pat and Leslie, for being with us today. And thank you to everyone who's at home or at your office listening. If there was a specific question that didn't get answered, or you just like some personal attention, please reach out to us at info@fci.coop or to Leslie or Patricia. Their contact information in the YouTube video. And you can find these slides at foodcoopinitiative.coop/slides. We'll also put that link in the YouTube. But just keep in mind, next month we have Designing Your Co-op with Nicole Klimek, September 16th. Please join us, and best of luck telling beautiful, compelling stories that move your community to action.
Thank you.